The agency's quarterly celebration dinner was the kind of event I usually attended alone. Polished, stuffy, all surface and no substance. It was mostly a chance to smile through clenched teeth, sip overpriced wine, and clap for people I barely knew. Jenna had skipped every one of them in the past, claimed they were pointless formalities. But this time she wanted to come. She asked 3 times if her dress was too much, said she didn't want to draw attention. But it was red, deep red, the kind that doesn't whisper. It announces, "You look amazing," I told her, because she did. She smiled at me, but there was something far away in her eyes, like she was already thinking about someone else seeing her. We arrived at the hotel around 7:10, late enough that most tables were already claimed. People were scattered between the banquet hall and the outer cocktail area, where ambient jazz floated over the murmur of networking. Jenna gripped my arm as we walked in, but it didn't feel like affection. It felt like performance. As I introduced her around, she laughed easily, made fast impressions, remembered people's names better than I ever did. Then I mentioned Leon, one of my colleagues from marketing, and I swear, something shifted in her posture. Barely, but it was there. "I didn't know Leon would be here," she said casually, scanning the room. She had only ever heard me mention him once, maybe twice, during some forgettable complaint about work politics. I hadn't even known she was listening. But now she was suddenly aware of him, interested. When she finally spotted him near the bar, her smile brightened in a way I hadn't seen in months. "Can we sit closer to his table?" she asked. "He seems fun." I laughed, thinking she was kidding. She wasn't. The seating wasn't formal, just assigned by department, and the marketing team section was just a row away from us. I shrugged and moved a few name cards. Jenna took the lead, weaving toward an open seat closer to Leon. I followed, still trying to convince myself it was nothing. I've always been good at ignoring red flags when they wave slow enough. The evening pressed on. Speeches, toasts, tired jokes from our regional VP. Every now and then, I glanced toward Jenna. Her attention kept drifting back to Leon, who was doing his usual thing. Charming, laughing too loudly, touching arms when he spoke. He wasn't subtle. He never had been. I always figured it was harmless. But then I saw it. She stood to head toward the restroom and Leon, already half out of his seat, placed a hand on her back. A light touch at first, but as she leaned past him, his fingers trailed down to the small of her back, then rested at her waist for a second too long. It wasn't a drunken mistake or a casual brush. It was deliberate, and Jenna didn't flinch. She smiled. Something in my chest went tight, like a pulled muscle right under the ribcage. I reached for my water and kept my face still, but my hand was shaking. I didn't say anything. Not then. Not even when she came back and whispered something in Leon's ear that made him laugh too loud. I was playing the role I always had, the stable one, the quiet one, the guy who doesn't make waves at a company dinner. An hour later, I saw the necklace. We were standing near the dessert table, half listening to the raffle prizes being called out. Jenna leaned forward to pour herself another glass of wine, and the pendant slipped out from beneath the neckline of her dress. Thin gold chain, a small teardrop-shaped ruby. It caught the light, shimmered for just a second, and I froze. I'd never seen it before. Now, I'm not the most observant husband in the world, but I know the jewelry I've given Jenna. A sapphire bracelet for our 2nd anniversary. A charm necklace she picked out herself. Nothing like this. This was different, delicate, expensive looking. Intentional. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone light. "Is that new?" She glanced down, then reached up and tucked it back beneath the fabric of her dress, like she didn't want me looking at it. "Oh no," she said quickly. "You gave it to me for Valentine's. Couple years ago." There was zero hesitation in her voice. Nothing defensive. Just easy. I blinked. "I did." "Yeah," she said with a little laugh, sipping her wine. "You probably don't even remember. You're so bad with details." That part was true. I am bad with details. I forget birthdays. I mix up the names of her cousins. I still can't keep track of half the shows we watched together. But something about her answer, the smoothness of it, didn't sit right. She was rehearsed. Or prepared. And that scared me more than anything else. I didn't press her. I just nodded like I believed her. But something inside me, some quiet part one didn't know I'd been ignoring, sat up and started taking notes. Because that necklace didn't come from me. And now I was wondering what else hadn't. I watched her for the rest of the night like I was observing someone else's wife. The way she laughed at Leon's jokes, even the bad ones. The way she leaned in just a little too close when they talked. How she always seemed aware of where he was in the room. I caught myself playing back the past few months. Her new gym schedule. The sudden work happy hours she never used to care about. Her locked phone, her changed passcode. The way she started wearing that perfume again. The one she used to say was too much. It all began to line up in the back of my mind like a slow-forming pattern. Nothing solid. Just foggy connections I wasn't ready to admit made sense. On the drive home, I watched her through the corner of my eye as she scrolled through her phone, grinning at something on her screen. She turned the brightness down, laughed softly, then put it face down in her lap. "You okay?" she asked suddenly. I nodded. "Yeah, just tired." "You were quiet all night." "Just listening." "To what?" I looked over at her. "Everything." She smiled again. A different smile this time, unsure maybe. Or maybe that was just me trying to find meaning in shadows. When we got home, she kissed me on the cheek and went straight upstairs to shower. I stayed downstairs, pouring myself a glass of bourbon I didn't want. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. That necklace was the first lie I caught in real time. Not a guess. Not a suspicion. Something clear. Tangible. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the reflection of the pendant in my memory, wondering who gave it to her. When? Where? Wondering how many things I had already missed. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to her in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the gentle rhythm of her breathing. She had her back to me, one hand tucked beneath her pillow, her other draped lazily over the covers. There was nothing outwardly unusual about it. This wasn't the first time we'd gone to sleep without saying much. But something was different now. The silence wasn't shared. It was hiding something. And once you feel that, it's like an itch you can't reach. I couldn't turn it off. The next morning, I woke up before her, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around the mug like it would anchor me. I kept replaying the moment I saw the necklace, the way she tucked it back like I'd caught her in the middle of something, then immediately spun a story I was supposed to accept without question. And I almost did. That part bothers me the most. Over the next few days, everything started clicking into place. Little things I'd noticed, but brushed aside. Patterns I hadn't bothered to question. Jenna's subtle shifts, her sudden distance. The way her routines had quietly rewritten themselves without my permission. Like her gym schedule. She used to go in the mornings, early before work while I was still asleep. But now she preferred evenings. Claimed the classes were better. That made sense for a while, until the classes started overlapping with happy hours. Then dinners. Then networking events that I somehow never heard about in advance. She'd come home late, kiss me on the forehead with a distracted smile, and say something vague like, "It went well." What went well? I didn't know. I never asked. I let it slide because I didn't want to seem insecure. I've always tried to be the partner who trusted her, gave her space. I used to wear that like a badge. Now I realized it made me easy to lie to. I started noticing how her phone never left her side. It used to live on the counter while we made dinner or watched TV. Now it was either in her pocket or face down on the table. And the screen? Always dimmed. Always silenced. If a text came in, she'd glance quickly, press the power button, and change the subject. I told myself she was just being protective of her privacy. But deep down, I knew better. Her perfume changed too. It wasn't a dramatic switch, more like a variation on the original. She used to wear this light floral scent, subtle and familiar. But lately it was heavier, muskier, more intense. I asked her about it once. "Oh, it's the same brand," she said. "They just updated the formula." That was a lie. I found the old bottle in the bathroom cabinet. It was still half full, untouched. She hadn't just updated a formula. She'd replaced something. With what? And for who? And then there was Vermont. 2 months ago, she disappeared for a weekend. Told me she needed a break. Just some time to breathe and catch up with an old college friend who lived in Burlington. I didn't fight it. I even helped her pack. Kissed her goodbye at the train station. She seemed grateful, maybe even relieved. She posted a few pictures that weekend. A wine glass on a table with a flickering candle, a rustic restaurant with exposed brick, a selfie in front of a fireplace. I remember liking the post without thinking twice. It wasn't until last week that I scrolled back through her feed and looked again. The fireplace photo was cropped tight, too tight. And in one of the dinner *TS, I saw a hand resting on the table across from hers. Just a hand. Barely visible. But it was wearing a leather watchband I recognized. Leon wears that watch. I'd seen it at work. Every day. Same face, same band. Same little scuff near the buckle. I even commented on it once. He said it was vintage. A gift from someone important. Maybe Jenna. That thought hit me like a punch in the gut. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My first instinct was to tell myself it was a coincidence. Lots of guys wear leather bands. But the grain, the scuff, the shape, I knew what I saw. And the worst part was I think I already knew it before I looked. After Vermont, something shifted even more between us. She was lighter, more animated. She hummed while she folded laundry, played music while she cooked, even suggested we repaint the guest room. At first I thought the trip had helped her decompress, that she'd finally let go of some unseen tension. Now I realize it was the calm that comes after a decision is made. Not long after that, she started talking about our relationship differently. Subtle phrasing changes. She said things like, "You've always been there for me. And you're such a good man. Not we, not us." It was like she was rehearsing her goodbye in kindness. But I didn't hear it. Not then. I remember one night in particular. We were brushing our teeth, standing side by side at the sink. I said something dumb. Something about how the faucet was leaking again. She laughed. That breathy kind of laugh people give when they're not really listening. Then turned to me and said, "You're a solid guy, Garrett. You know that?" It was such a weird thing to say in that moment. Like I was a dependable car. Reliable. Gets the job done. I smiled and mumbled something like, "That's the idea." But her eyes had already drifted back to her reflection. I started checking her social media more often. Not because I didn't trust her, or at least that's what I told myself, but because I was looking for the gaps, the inconsistencies. And they were there. Posts tagged at client dinners with no one else in the photo. Comments from people I didn't recognize. Names I hadn't heard her mention. Vague captions like, "Much needed night," or "Just what I needed." I started searching those names. Clicking. Looking for connections. Most of the profiles were private, but some were open enough to paint a picture. Leon's was one of them. His feed was mostly professional. Office photos, campaign teasers, branded content. But there were personal touches. And a few weeks ago, he posted a picture from a wine bar, the same one Jenna had tagged during her Vermont trip. He hadn't tagged her. But the timing lined up. So did the table. The glasses. It was all starting to fall into place. Even the way she looked at me had changed. Not with contempt or guilt. Not even pity. Just detachment. Like I was becoming part of the background. Like she had already started the process of mentally separating herself from me. And all that was left was the formality. And the worst part? She was still so kind. She still asked how my day was. Still offered to pick up groceries. Still laughed at my bad jokes. But none of it felt real anymore. Felt like an echo. Like someone performing the shape of love without the substance. I couldn't stop thinking about the necklace. I hadn't seen it again since the dinner. It hadn't made a second appearance. Maybe she realized I noticed. Maybe she knew she'd slipped. Or maybe it was only ever meant for someone else to see. I didn't ask her about it again. Couldn't. Not yet. But something had changed in me. Something I couldn't put back. I started watching her more closely. Not out of paranoia, out of clarity. I had given her the benefit of the doubt for months. But now that doubt was gone and what replaced it was sharper, more focused. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't even hurt. I was just aware. I stopped trying to prove myself right or wrong. I started listening, not to her words, but to what they avoided. I started noticing the gaps in her stories, the way she deflected when I asked about her day, the new softness in her voice whenever she said, "I'm tired. I think I'll go read." Read what? With who? I didn't have answers yet, but I had something better. I had a reason to start asking the right questions. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what I might find. 3 days after the agency dinner, I came home in the middle of the day. It wasn't planned. I'd forgotten my laptop charger and was already halfway through a meeting on my phone before realizing the battery was on its last leg. I told my team I'd be back in 20 and drove straight home, irritated at myself for being scatterbrained. But irritation gave way to something else when I pulled into the driveway and saw Jenna's car. She wasn't supposed to be home. She'd said she had meetings back-to-back until 4. It was noon. I checked the calendar again on my phone. Her client lunch should have just started. I shut off the engine and sat there for a moment. Nothing about this was suspicious on the surface. People's plans change. Maybe a meeting got canceled. Maybe she forgot something too. But I didn't believe that. Not anymore. I stepped quietly up the porch and unlocked the front door. The house was still. Not silent. I could hear something faint. Music? No voices. One voice, actually, hers. I eased the door open. Our living room sat at the front of the house, connected by a hallway that curved left past the stairs. Jenna wasn't in sight, but I could hear her clearly now. She was on speakerphone. "No, he has no idea," she said, laughing softly. I froze. There was a pause, followed by a muffled male voice. Familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. Then her voice again. Lighter. More in asterisk mate than I'd heard in weeks. I know, but he's used to things being predictable. I let him think they still are. I took one slow step into the hall and leaned just enough to peek around the corner. She was standing near the couch, barefoot, a mug of coffee in her hand. Her phone lay face up on the coffee table. She hadn't noticed me. Her posture was relaxed, at ease. Not guarded. Comfortable. Too comfortable. The man's voice came through again, lower now, but I could make out the tone soft, teasing. And that's when I recognized it. Leon. He was on the other end of the line, calling her from work, or maybe from his car. Wherever he was, it didn't matter. He was calling her. During a weekday, while she stood in our home, sipping coffee in a t-shirt that wasn't mine. Jenna let out another laugh and walked toward the window, her back now fully to me. "No," she said, dragging the word out playfully. "I didn't tell him about the restaurant. Why would I? That's not something he'd understand." Another pause, then more murmurs. I couldn't hear all of them, but I caught my own name this time. "He's not a bad guy," Jenna said, quieter now. "He's just steady, you know? And I've been steady for so long I forgot what it's like to feel." She didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need her to. I stepped back, retreating quietly into the hallway, the way someone might tiptoe through a burning house. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the version of me they had created together. A prop, fixture, placeholder. The man who still mowed the lawn and folded laundry while they whispered to each other during business hours. There was no confrontation that day, no shouting match. I didn't reveal myself, didn't slam the door or demand answers. I slipped out of the house with the same care I used to come in, walked back to my car, drove around the block twice before parking down the street to think. And then I sat there, in the driver's seat, watching our house from a distance. Eventually she left, walked out the front door like nothing was different. She had changed into jeans, carried a laptop bag, and looked every bit like a woman off to meet a client. She locked the door behind her and didn't glance back. She never looked back. That night I said nothing. I didn't mention coming home early, didn't say I'd heard her. I listened to her rehearse her day over dinner, nodding in the right places, even managing a smile when she mentioned how exhausted she was. I think she knew something had shifted, though. She was more cautious. Watched me closely when she spoke, like she was scanning for signs I might be onto her. But I gave her nothing. Silence became my shield. That night, while she slept, back turned again as always, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision. I wasn't going to fight for her. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to try and fix something she had already torn apart behind my back. But I wasn't going to let this unravel me either. The man she described on the phone, predictable, steady, blind, that version of me was gone. The next morning, I got up early. Didn't say much. Showered, dressed, made coffee. While she sat at the counter scrolling through her phone, I printed a blank template for legal separation and slid it into my briefcase. I kissed her on the cheek before I left. She flinched. At work, I didn't talk to anyone about it. Not even my closest friend in the office, a guy named Vince who'd known me since the early days. I kept everything measured, routine. But inside, I was documenting, storing things, dates, phrases, details. That weekend, Jenna said she was going to a spa overnight. Just to decompress, she said. I've been feeling so off lately. I told her to enjoy it. She hesitated for a beat, as if she wanted me to ask more. When I didn't, she smiled and kissed me goodbye. I waited until her location pinged 2 counties away, not at a spa, but in a small lakeside town where Leon's parents happened to have a cabin. I knew that because he bragged about it during meetings once, calling it his off-the-grid sanctuary. Jenna posted nothing. No photos. No tags. Just a single text Sunday night that read, "Wish I could have stayed longer. That place is magic." I didn't respond. Monday morning, I contacted someone I never thought I'd speak to. A private investigator. I told myself it was for peace of mind. But the truth was, I didn't need confirmation. I already had it. I just needed proof. A day later, I quietly moved out of the house. Left her a note, nothing emotional. Just a single-page typed letter that outlined my intention to separate and a request not to contact me until further notice. I signed it, dated it, left it on the kitchen counter next to her French press. I moved into a short-term rental 2 towns over. Sparse, clean, anonymous. She called 3 times. I didn't answer. She emailed once. The subject line simply, "What are you doing?" No body text. Just that. I archived it. Later that week, the investigator sent me the first file. A photo of Jenna and Leon, arm in arm, walking down a side street near the cabin. Another, later that evening, of them sitting on the porch, wine glasses in hand, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. Everything she'd hidden in tone, in phrasing, in casual omissions. It was all laid bare now. There were no questions left. No maybe this or what if that. Just the quiet truth of who she was when she thought I wasn't watching. I hired a second investigator to pull financials. I gave him access to our shared statements, our credit accounts. He found 3 hotels, 5 dinners, and 1 flight to Chicago that she never took. All wrapped up in company reimbursements and vague travel codes. Leon's name showed up twice, once on a car rental, and once on a restaurant reservation that had been accidentally logged under his business email. A small slip, a breadcrumb, but it was enough. I took everything and started building a case. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted control. She had orchestrated everything in the shadows, built a secret version of our life that I wasn't meant to see. And now I was dragging it into the light, quietly, methodically. She once called me predictable. And maybe she was right, but predictability has its advantages. Because when everything comes crashing down, when the lies unravel and the truth is exposed, the steady man is still standing. And he knows exactly what to do next. I didn't call her. I didn't show up at her work. Didn't text in the middle of the night with a demand to explain herself. I didn't cry. Didn't beg. Didn't ask why him or when did it start or how long have you been lying to me. I didn't need to. Instead, I disappeared quietly, efficiently. I left the house at dawn the day after I received the final investigator report. She was still asleep, or pretending to be, Either way, I didn't bother to wake her. I packed only what I needed. A suitcase, my laptop, a file folder full of documentation, and one framed photo. The two of us in Rome, smiling in front of a fountain I can't remember the name of. I wasn't taking it for nostalgia. I was taking it to remind myself how well she could lie. Before I left, I placed a sealed envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a printed letter, professional, emotionless. It stated that I was initiating a legal separation, that I had removed myself from all shared accounts, and that she would be contacted by my attorney regarding next steps. I signed it Garrett, like I was writing to a stranger, because I checked into a furnished rental about 40 minutes outside the city. A studio with blank walls, white linen, and a small desk in the corner. Nothing personal, nothing attached. It was perfect. It gave me space, and space gave me precision. From there, I started collecting. Every password, every bank login, every document I had access to. I wasn't invading her privacy. These were shared assets, shared records. Our names sat side by side on tax forms, leases, refinance agreements. For all her secrets, Jenna hadn't bothered to untangle the legal part of us. That was her first mistake. The second was trusting Leon. Within 2 days, I had a full timeline courtesy of 2 investigators, a forensics guy I hired from a cybersecurity firm, and an old friend from college who'd gone into private practice after doing litigation work for a finance firm. They gave me receipts, GPS logs, overlapping travel dates. I had **TS of hotel bookings, some on her card, some on his. I had digital copies of messages Leon had sent from his work email to her personal account, including one where he wrote, "If this ever gets out, we'll both be screwed." That line became the title of the Dropbox folder I compiled. If this ever gets out. Jenna never saw it coming. Not because I was being sneaky, but because she never imagined I could be cold. To her, I was the even-tempered husband, the fixer, the forgiver. She hadn't met this version of me. This version didn't chase closure. He built a case. The first call I made was to a lawyer named Ellen North. She came recommended by someone I trusted. Someone who described her as quiet, brilliant, and ruthless. That was all I needed to hear. Ellen read the files silently for almost 10 minutes before saying a single word. When she finally looked up from the folder, she asked, "How aggressive do you want to be?" I said, "Surgical." And that's exactly what we were. She helped me draft a pre-divorce settlement proposal. Not a threat, not a plea. A clean, well-organized presentation, complete with a list of documented incidents of infidelity, unauthorized spending, misuse of joint accounts, and one signature Jenna had given months ago on a refinance document she clearly hadn't read. I still remembered the morning she signed it. Rushing to a friend's birthday brunch, she flipped through the paperwork half awake, asking, "This is just routine, right?" I nodded. She signed without hesitation. That single document shifted full ownership of several key assets under my name. Now it was Exhibit A. The day the courier delivered the envelope to our old house, I watched through the ring cam, still linked to my phone. Jenna opened the door in sweatpants, holding a smoothie. She took the package with a smile. Signed without reading. Again. 15 minutes later, she called me. I let it ring out. She called again. Then again. 12 times total. The messages went from confused to defensive to furious. The last one was just silence, background noise, maybe her breathing or tears. I didn't play it twice. Leon didn't call. But I didn't expect him to. His reaction came through different channels. A week later, I received a text from a former coworker. "Dude, Leon's being investigated." I kept my reply short. For what? Vendor accounts. Payout discrepancies. Someone flagged his expense reports. It wasn't a coincidence. One of the receipts in my file showed a luxury dinner billed to a consulting vendor the company had no record of hiring. That receipt was tied to Jenna's card, but Leon had expensed it. When the internal audit began, I didn't say a word. I didn't leak anything. I simply nudged the right information into the right inboxes, using a burner email created just for this purpose. No threats, no drama, just digital breadcrumbs delivered anonymously, letting the system do what it was designed to do. By the time Jenna realized what was happening, Leon was already under review. His department put him on leave, pending investigation. And company gossip spread like wildfire. Word got out. Vendors whispered. HR scrambled. His reputation began to cave inward before he could mount any defense. Jenna didn't message me again. Not directly, but I heard from her sister. A vague, awkward email asking if I was okay, and if I'd talked to Jenna recently. I didn't respond. Then one of her college friends, a woman I barely knew, posted a cryptic Instagram story. Nothing worse than watching a good man get burned. I watched Jenna's world begin to ripple. Not explode, just ripple. Quiet shifts. Small exits. The first board she sat on removed her from the website. Then the second. The nonprofit she volunteered for put out a new call for board members, with no mention of her previous role. I didn't need to do anything more. The truth had its own momentum. At night, in my rental, I sat by the window and watched traffic lights change. I worked late, ate simply, slept better than I had in months. Not because I was happy I wasn't, but because the noise in my head was gone. I didn't need her to admit what she did. I already knew, and she knew I knew. That was enough. One night, I drove past our old house. I didn't get out of the car, just parked across the street, engine running. The porch light was on. The mailbox was stuffed with flyers. I could see the edge of a pizza box through the kitchen window. No music, no laughter, no warmth. The house looked like what it was, a shell of something that used to be alive. I took a photo of it, not for evidence, not for revenge, just as a reminder that silence can be the loudest answer of all. And sometimes, the best revenge is saying absolutely nothing. I didn't expect her to sign. The settlement proposal Ellen and I prepared was aggressive by design. It laid out everything in painstaking, undeniable detail. Proof of her affair, financial misconduct, breach of joint fiduciary duties, and documentation that showed she'd authorized transfers without my knowledge. Her signature was on those refinance papers, and like most of the damage she caused, she'd done it in a hurry. In her own words, just routine, right? It wasn't routine. It was leverage. We had included 3 options for division of assets. One of them was generous, close to equal split, contingent on her immediate cooperation and assigned non-contest clause. The second was less kind. The third was nuclear. Her lawyer, a man named Bradley something, the kind of guy who wore pocket squares in court, called Ellen 3 days after Jenna received the packet. According to Ellen, his voice was measured but tight, stressed but trying not to show it. That meant he'd read everything, and he knew we had her cornered. "She's not going to sign under threat," he'd said. Ellen responded simply, "It's not a threat, it's a choice." I let her handle everything. My role was simple: provide data, confirm facts, and stay quiet. Emotion had no seat at the table anymore. This wasn't about pain or betrayal. It was about process, about making sure she understood, in legal terms, that every action had a consequence, and every lie had a ledger. While her legal team reviewed the evidence, the consequences started landing on Leon. The audit at our agency had gone public, not splashed across the headlines, but enough to spark rumors. At first, it was whispers: Leon's on leave, something about vendor accounts, some discrepancy in billing. Then people started connecting dots. See, Leon was a golden boy. Quick promotions, the charm of a guy who always knew when to laugh and when to listen. But people forget charm isn't a defense. Paper trails don't care if you're likable. The investigators found inconsistencies in travel reimbursements, duplicate invoice payments, and, the most damning, a pattern of false receipts tied to client entertainment, restaurants, hotels, rideshare transactions, all logged under vendor meetings that never happened. At least 3 of those dinners were spent with Jenna. One of them was in Vermont. The company's compliance team flagged him for ethics violations and misuse of company funds. HR issued a statement the following Monday. Leon Morales is no longer with the company. No send-off, No farewell email. Just gone. I didn't celebrate, but I won't pretend I didn't feel a certain stillness, like something had clicked back into place. Quietly, finally, I found out later that his company credit card had been suspended before he was even terminated. When the investigation report was finalized, it included a note about a conflict of interest tied to a personal relationship with a spouse of another employee. That wasn't meant for public eyes, but people talk. By the end of that week, Jenna had gone dark online. Her Facebook disappeared first, then her Instagram. LinkedIn still had her photo, but the tagline had been stripped. Just her name. No board member. No communications lead. Her resume was shrinking by the day, her affiliations dropping off one by one like loose threads. The charity she volunteered with, one of those polished nonprofits that hold silent auctions with wine fountains, updated their website. Her name was gone, quietly deleted from the About Us page. Her sister called me again, left a voicemail. This time her tone was different, less neutral. Garrett, I don't know what you're doing, but it's working. Jenna's not herself. She's freaking out. She says you've turned everyone against her. I'm not saying you should talk to her. I thought you should know. She's unraveling. I didn't return the call, because none of it was true. I hadn't turned anyone against her. Jenna had done that all by herself. I wasn't orchestrating a takedown. I was simply holding up a mirror. If the reflection burned, that was on her, not me. She responded to the settlement draft a week later, through her lawyer. They countered. Light edits. Revisions around the non-contest clause. A few nitpicks about the financial wording. Ellen called me after reviewing it. She's not fighting, she said. She's just trying to save face. Let her try, I replied. We agreed to most of the changes. The core structure remained intact. Jenna would forfeit all interest in the house, which I now solely owned thanks to the early refinance. She would receive a buyout from our joint savings, a modest portion calculated down to the cent. No alimony, no long-term support, and she would remove herself from all shared financial instruments within 30 days of signing. She signed on day 11. I saw the signature come through electronically. Jenna's handwriting, smooth, practiced, familiar. It used to be on birthday cards, grocery lists, post-it notes stuck to the bathroom mirror with things like, pick up avocados or, I love you. Now it was on a line that ended our marriage. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. After the documents were filed with the court, Ellen sent me a final summary. Case status. Awaiting judgment. That would take a few more weeks, maybe longer. But the legal work was done. Everything else was just formality. A few days after the signing, I received an envelope, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a letter. From Jenna. She hadn't written me